What if I told you one of the fastest turnarounds in recent football memory is happening right in front of us, and most people still don't fully believe it? The New England Patriots are suddenly back in the biggest conversations again, not slowly climbing, not cautiously rebuilding, jumping straight into championship-level buzz with a young quarterback and a brand-new head coach leading the charge. And if you're thinking, that timeline makes no sense, you're not alone. A lot of analysts are saying the exact same thing. Because this kind of leap isn't supposed to happen overnight. Most franchises spend years stuck in the middle, changing coordinators, rotating quarterbacks, patching roster holes, and hoping something finally clicks. But according to growing media buzz and league chatter, New England may have skipped multiple steps of the usual rebuild ladder. And now people are scrambling to explain how it happened so fast. At the center of the storm is a second-year quarterback playing far beyond early expectations and a first-year coach known for bringing edge, discipline, and locker room accountability. That combination alone is rare. When it actually produces results this quickly, it raises eyebrows across the league. Some commentators are calling it a culture reset. Others say it's a perfect scheme alignment moment. A few skeptics insist it's being overhyped. The disagreement is exactly why this story is blowing up. There's also a deeper layer here that casual fans might be missing. This surge didn't come from one flashy move or one lucky stretch. Reports and analyst breakdowns suggest it came from several behind-the-scenes changes happening at once: coaching philosophy, quarterback development structure, and a defensive identity that looks very different from what we saw just a short time ago. But before you buy into the comeback headline, you have to understand how far this franchise actually fell, and how messy things got after the dynasty era ended. Because without that context, this sudden rise doesn't just look impressive, it looks almost impossible. And once you see what really changed, the whole picture starts to shift. It started with a moment that didn't just change a roster, it shook an entire football identity. When Tom Brady walked away from New England, the reaction across the league wasn't just surprise, it was disbelief. For 2 decades, the Patriots and their dynasty felt permanent. 6 titles, constant playoff runs, and a system that looked untouchable. Most fans assumed it would simply fade slowly. Instead, it snapped overnight. After that split, the organization entered a phase many analysts later described as an identity vacuum. The system that worked for 20 years suddenly didn't have its centerpiece. And while the coaching legacy still carried weight, the on-field product started showing cracks almost immediately. The Patriots weren't feared anymore, they were being figured out. The first fixes came fast and they came risky. Veteran stopgap options were brought in. Draft picks were rushed into starting roles. Offensive direction kept shifting. From the outside, it looked like the franchise was trying multiple blueprints at once instead of committing to one. Commentators at the time openly questioned whether the post-dynasty transition plan was clear, or if the team was improvising week to week. Then came the coordinator shuffle that drew heavy criticism across football media. Instead of bringing in a proven offensive architect, the play-calling structure reportedly leaned on coaches without deep offensive resumes. Analysts didn't hold back. Many called it one of the strangest staffing experiments of that period. The results showed on Sundays: stalled drives, confused schemes, and quarterback development that never stabilized. Young passers rotated in and out. Momentum never stuck. Confidence looked shaky. By the time the losses stacked up, league voices were no longer talking about a retool. They were calling it a full reset. And here, why that matters: because the lower a franchise drops, the harder and slower the climb is supposed to be. Which makes what happened next even more surprising. Because the move that followed wasn't cautious, safe, or gradual. It was bold, and according to many observers, it changed the entire temperature inside the building. The real turning point didn't arrive with a headline trade or a splash signing. It came with a quarterback decision that, at the time, many analysts called high upside but high risk. That pick was Drake May, and early on, expectations were all over the place. Some draft experts believed he had elite traits but would need time. Others questioned whether the Patriots' unstable offensive environment was the right place for a young quarterback to grow. That concern showed up often in preseason discussions, not as criticism of the player, but of the situation around him. Because history shows even top prospects can stall if the structure isn't right. Early reports suggested the staff tried to avoid throwing him into chaos too quickly. There was talk of a controlled rollout plan: sit, learn, absorb, then step in when the system stabilized. But once he started getting real snaps, the tone of the conversation changed. Fast. Film analysts began pointing out his pocket movement, off-platform throws, and willingness to attack tight windows. Not hype clips, technical breakdown praise. You started hearing phrases like processing speed, layered throws, and field vision under pressure. That's when the narrative shifted from development project to possible franchise answer. What made the buzz louder was the adversity angle. Commentators repeatedly noted that his protection wasn't elite and the weapon group wasn't viewed as top tier, yet the production kept showing up. That sparked a wave of debate segments built around one question: is he already outperforming his environment? Some shows even floated early MVP-level chatter, framed as discussion, not prediction, which tells you how dramatic the perception swing became. When second-year quarterbacks enter award conversations, even hypothetically, it means the league has noticed. But here, the key detail many insiders emphasized: quarterback flashes alone don't flip a franchise culture this quickly. Talent helps, production helps, but sustained turnaround usually requires a leadership reset above the roster. And that's exactly where the next move changed everything. Because the coaching hire that followed didn't just adjust the scheme, it reset the building. The next move is the one many insiders now point to as the culture pivot, the coaching change that reportedly altered the tone inside the facility almost immediately. When Mike Vrabel stepped into the picture, the reaction around league circles wasn't quiet approval, it was strong recognition. This was viewed as a stability and edge hire, not an experiment. Across media panels and insider reports, Vrabel has long been described as a tone-setter coach, detail-heavy, accountability-driven, and player-direct. During his previous head coaching run, analysts often credited him with squeezing more competitiveness out of rosters that weren't always stacked with superstar talent. That reputation matters when a franchise is trying to rebuild its identity, not just its depth chart. His exit from his previous team had already generated debate across football talk shows. Several reports at the time suggested front office tension and roster direction disagreements, framed as organizational friction, not scandal. So when he became available, multiple commentators said he wouldn't stay on the market long. New England moving quickly was widely interpreted as intentional, not reactive. According to team beat discussions and post-hire interviews, the early emphasis under the new staff centered on discipline, situational execution, and role clarity. Those themes kept repeating in press availability language. And when the same coaching themes repeat publicly, it usually means they're being hammered internally too. Players and analysts alike started using similar words to describe the shift: structure, edge, accountability, detail. When independent voices echo the same descriptors, it's often a sign the culture message is landing. But here, what made the move even more impactful: it didn't come alone. Because the hire that followed is the one offensive analysts say truly accelerated the quarterback's growth curve. Not a flashy name for headlines, but a familiar system architect with a long quarterback track record. And once that piece locked in, the offense stopped looking improvised and started looking intentional. The culture reset got attention, but the system reset is what many analysts say actually unlocked the offense. Because right after the head coaching shift, another move followed that didn't dominate headlines at first, yet football insiders immediately understood its impact. The return of a proven offensive coordinator with deep quarterback experience changed the entire structure of how this unit operated. When Josh McDaniels came back into the offensive picture, media reaction was split at first, but film analysts were quick to point out one important detail. Whatever the broader debates around his head coaching stops, his quarterback development track record is widely respected. You kept hearing the same examples brought up: structured reads, situational play design, and progression-based concepts that help young passers play faster. That mattered for one big reason: young quarterbacks don't just need talent around them, they need clarity. And according to multiple breakdown segments and coaching interviews, the offensive structure suddenly looked more defined week to week. Route combinations made more sense together. Protection calls matched play intent. Adjustments looked planned instead of improvised. Commentators started highlighting how the play-calling rhythm helped simplify post-snap decisions. Fewer hesitation throws, better timing windows, cleaner red zone sequencing. Those are coaching fingerprints, not coincidence. There was also renewed emphasis on situational football, third down packages, 2-minute execution, and field position awareness. Analysts often say those areas are where coordinator experience shows up the most, and the Patriots' improvement in those spots became a recurring talking point in weekly recap shows. Most importantly, quarterback comfort visibly increased. You could hear it in press conferences and see it in on-field body language: quicker checks, more authority at the line, smoother tempo control. When a young QB starts commanding pace instead of reacting to it, coaches usually deserve part of the credit. But even with offensive stability returning, several commentators argued that offense wasn't the true engine of this surge, because the unit that kept getting called title level on broadcast panels wasn't the scoring side of the ball. It was the defense, and the way it started dictating games caught a lot of people off guard. While most of the early headlines focused on the quarterback leap and the coaching reset, a different story started forming on film, and defensive analysts were the first to call it out. This wasn't just a better defense. According to multiple broadcast breakdowns and weekly review shows, this unit began playing like a game-control defense, the kind that changes how opponents call plays. What stood out first was versatility. Commentators kept pointing to how the front could shift looks without substituting, showing pressure and dropping out, crowding the line and then bailing into disguised coverage. That kind of pre-snap uncertainty forces quarterbacks to slow down, and when timing offenses slow down, mistakes follow. The secondary also drew repeated praise in analyst segments. Coverage discipline, leverage control, and recovery speed became recurring talking points. Instead of relying only on turnovers, this group started winning by shrinking throwing windows. That doesn't always show up in highlight reels, but it shows up on third down percentages and red zone stops. Up front, pressure disruption, not just sacks, became the theme. Film reviewers emphasized hurry rates, pocket collapse angles, and edge containment. In other words, even when the quarterback got the ball out, it often wasn't comfortable. Defensive success at the playoff level is rarely about one superstar. It's about coordinated disruption, and that phrase kept coming up in commentary. There was also an emotional layer that several reporters mentioned: the staff rally factor. With a defensive leader on the coaching side dealing with a serious health battle, players publicly spoke about extra motivation and focus. Handled respectfully in coverage, but clearly impactful inside the locker room. Analysts often note that shared adversity can tighten execution, and some believe that effect showed up on the field. As playoff games stacked up, a counterargument started circulating. Critics claimed the path wasn't as tough as advertised. Strength of opponent debates, injury context arguments, they caught teams at the right time takes all started trending. And that pushback created the final layer of this story, because not everyone is buying the Miracle Run narrative, and the disagreement is only making the conversation louder. The moment a fast turnaround story gets big, the pushback follows, and that's exactly what's happening here. Not everyone is sold on this Patriots surge, being as dominant as it looks on the surface. In fact, several analysts and debate shows have started poking holes in the narrative, arguing that context matters more than hype. One of the loudest counterpoints revolves around schedule and playoff path. Some critics claim the matchups broke in New England's favor. You'll hear phrases like right opponents at the right time or face struggling offenses floating around sports panels. It's not being framed as luck exactly, more like timing. The suggestion is that momentum sometimes grows when brackets fall a certain way. Supporters immediately fire back with a different angle. They argue that labeling wins as convenient ignores how defensive pressure creates bad quarterback play. In other words, what critics call sloppy opponent performance, supporters call forced mistakes. That debate, coincidence versus causation, has become one of the hottest argument loops around this run. There's also skepticism around the speed of the quarterback rise. Whenever a young passer climbs quickly, a segment of analysts warns about sample size and defensive adjustment cycles. The claim is that the success is fake. It's that the league eventually adapts, and the true test comes in year 2 and 3 of defensive game planning. It's a caution flag, not a dismissal, but it adds tension to the conversation. Another talking point skeptics raise is sustainability. Culture resets and scheme clarity can create a surge, they say, but sustaining contender status requires roster depth and injury resilience over multiple seasons. That question, is this a spike or a foundation, keeps showing up in expert roundtables. And here's the interesting part. Disagreement actually strengthens the story. When nobody argues, viewers tune out. When experts split, fans lean in. Because now the discussion isn't just about what this season became. It's about what this team actually is going forward. And that final question might matter more than the result of any single game. Step back from the headlines for a second, and this story feels bigger than just one playoff run or one championship appearance. What's really changed here, according to many analysts and league observers, is the direction of the franchise. Not a temporary spark, a structural shift. A short time ago, the Patriots were being used as an example of how hard it is to escape the shadow of a dynasty era. The post-legend phase looked messy, uncertain, and unstable. Quarterback questions, coaching questions, identity questions. Now the conversation sounds completely different. The new theme is foundation, quarterback identified, coaching tone established, system clarity restored. Drake May is now widely discussed as a legitimate long-term centerpiece, not just a hopeful prospect. The coaching leadership is being described as culture-first and accountability-driven. The offensive structure looks intentional. The defense plays with edge and coordination. When multiple independent analysts start using the same descriptors, it usually signals that the shift is real, not just media hype. At the same time, the skepticism hasn't vanished, and that's important. Some experts still warn that fast rises must survive adjustment cycles. That next season brings new film, new counters, new tests, which makes the next chapter even more interesting than the current one. Because now the question is, are they back? The question is, are they built to stay back? Is this the start of the Patriots' next sustained era, or the peak of a perfectly timed surge? That's what makes this moment so compelling. The outcome of one game matters, but the trajectory of the franchise matters more. So here's the real debate. Do you believe this is the foundation of a new long-term contender, or a breakout season that caught the league off guard? Drop your take below, because this story is still unfolding, and the next chapter might be even louder. Do you like this personality?